Okay.
The Last of Us 2 has been the most controversial game of 2020 so far, and I don't think it'll lose that title unless Wholesome 100 Keanu Reeves actually has sex with a rabbit called Big Chungus.
Big Chungus is not funny.
This anger has been talked about publicly ever since most of the game's biggest plot elements were leaked to the public, allegedly by a disgruntled Naughty Dog employee. According to that same report, it was for worker mistreatment and crunch times that Naughty Dog was forcing on their employees. Now, I could probably sit here all day and talk about how game companies abuse their workers and how they should all rise up and overthrow the bourgeoisie and establish a proletarian dictatorship. But you've obviously come here for a reason, and let's just get it over with. The Last of Us 2 is not a bad game. Far from it, actually. I think it's a pretty good game. This isn't to say it's a perfect game, or better than the original, but I think a lot of the arguments made against the game are based off of emotion instead of facts and logic.
I might play it more, who knows, but I'm done for right now. I played for 2 hours, and I witnessed the most undignified death for one of my favorite characters in all of gaming.
Put a sock in it. No one cares.
We're going to be addressing those arguments as well as some more well-constructed ones in this new to be dislike bomb video in defense of The Last of Us 2. Spoilers ahead, by the way. This is one of the most level-headed arguments I've seen, so we're gonna strike at it first. Charlie explains it best.
The storytelling and narrative in this game is absolute dog shit. It is. I'm sorry to say that. It fucking hurts me to say that because of how much I loved the first Last of Us, but this is a very big decline. In a nutshell, the entire story is revenge is bad. And they just keep hammering that theme home for the entire 25 hours. Revenge is bad. Revenge fucking sucks. Revenge has all of these far-reaching consequences. Everyone's getting hurt around you because of revenge. Don't fight fire with fire. Revenge with revenge. It's terrible.
There is one glaring issue, however. The Last of Us series has never been a game about theme. It's always been about a relationship between characters. And again, this isn't to say themes aren't present in the game or they aren't important, but they're never meant to be the main focal point of it. However, this doesn't mean it can't be criticized. Both games deal with aspects of loss, with both characters losing something in the beginning of the game, so they both set out to accomplish some goal that would hopefully involve them getting back some semblance of what they've lost, at any cost necessary. That any cost necessary part gets largely ignored by people who like Joel. He literally doomed all of humanity and personally probably killed an entire small country's army, personally voided Ellie's life of any greater meaning to it, just so he could feel less bad about the death of his own daughter. And now, many of you who have played the first game, or at least somewhat familiar with it, are probably typing on your keyboards right now, because you're upset in how I just described that. You are probably typing there's more nuance to that. Joel has been fucked over time and time again, losing family, friends, and this girl has been the connection between him and the past he so longs to go back to. So of course he would go through those lengths just to preserve it. And that's where I stop you. You're completely correct in that judgment. However, in how you just treated the first game right now is how you should treat the second game, especially when the majority of the reviewers ignores the relationships and dynamics in the second game. So let's tell the correct story for The Last of Us 2. After Joel had lied to Ellie about what happened in the Firefly base, Joel attempted to try and connect to Ellie more, like the father-daughter relationship he always missed. But of course, Ellie was not 100% on Joel's story. She found out the truth about what Joel had done to her, and the Fireflies as well. She doesn't really talk to Joel for a while after that, until Joel tries to defend Ellie after a guy calls her a not-so-nice word for a lesbian. Ellie seems initially pissed off at him for this, but she tells him later on that she's gonna try to forgive him for what he did back at the hospital. Then he dies. Now, I thought I should talk about this here just to get it over with. A lot of people seem to be pissed off about how Joel was killed in the second game, that being, a golf club to the head. And in all honesty, I don't really see a problem in the way he was killed. The Last of Us 2 attempted to be more realistic than the first, and that realism is omnipresent with every character in the game. No character is given a graceful ending, because realistically, very few people would be able to get that Arthur Morgan looking at the sunset ending. Manny is killed by a surprise gunshot to the head by Tommy. Abby, of course, can't really mourn and toll over the dead body at that point. Jesse is shot as he runs out to help Tommy. Ellie, of course, can't really mourn over his death immediately because she needs to make sure Tommy isn't shot too. Yara gets shot in the stomach, and again, you don't have time to mourn her. This happens to every character, and the same, of course, happens to every NPC. In these scenarios, you don't have time to sit and mourn, you just have to move. And for people complaining that a golf club to the head was silly, Ellie, I agree, but if someone killed your family and nearly fucked over all your friends, would you give them a respectable death? And even if in the wider span of things you think Joel is too good of a person to deserve that, may I remind you again, the game is about characters and their relationships. Abby has been plagued with a desire to avenge the death of her father for 4 fucking years at that point, so of course she wouldn't give him like a Jesus on the fucking cross ending. And for those of you who are about to draw parallels between Abby's journey and Ellie, let's dispel that right here, right now. Ellie was never dead set on killing Abby. Ellie was constantly reminded by her targets and even some of her friends her revenge trip would have consequences, and that maybe Joel wasn't the most perfect person in the world. So to summarize this tangent section, whatever you call it, Joel's death may not have been graceful, but it's consistent with the theme of consequence for the story, and his death is not anything really unique that this game or the previous one has seen. As we've already established, the second game deals with a loss, and one of the main aspects of losing a person in the game and in real life is this saint-like viewing of what they've done. Most people do this because of course it's disrespectful to go to someone's funeral and say this guy sucked ass or some shit. When remembering a person we personally liked or loved, we tend not to acknowledge their faults. And this is extremely apparent with how Ellie deals with the grief of losing Joel in the game. Ellie, overdoing more and more immoral things in her quest to avenge Joel, starts to actually get a more nuanced look at things. Through flashbacks she has of him, it starts out with fatherly situations that further drive her to avenge him. But the memories of what Joel has done start to flood into her head, all culminating into her decision not to kill Abby at the end of the game. In fact, multiple characters in Abby's crew express no grievances with getting revenge on Joel. However, they get the consequences for what revenge entails, being that it of course furthers a cycle. Again, the game never explicitly says that cycle is bad, and plenty of people who've played the game come out of it wishing they had killed Abby, full well knowing about that cycle and what they're pushing. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of valid criticisms with the plot. However, just saying the entire plot is bad just because a story about revenge has been done before is fucking stupid. Now, I thought this was just kind of a meme, but apparently some people are actually serious that this game is SJW propaganda. So let me just point it out to you. Having a buff woman does not make it gay propaganda. Realistically, in any apocalypse scenario, gay and trans people will still exist, so the fact that they are in this game isn't really unrealistic or pushing an agenda or some shit. And when characters are an actual minority, it doesn't really become their only defining characteristic. And it's only ever mentioned 2 times, one being the dance scene where the old guy calls Ellie the not so nice word for lesbians. And the entire Yara and Lev portion. The first one is obviously self-explanatory, but the second one is more unique because it worked into the plot in a realistic way. I'm not sure how many people actually legitimately believe this game is SJW propaganda, but the fact that there are some makes me obliged to dunk on them. Again, I'm not Arnita Sarkeesian's little bitch or whatever insult you can come up with, but the fact that trans people exist in the game doesn't make it woke propaganda. The Last of Us 2 isn't a perfect game by any means, and there are good criticisms to be levied at it. But the constant generalization of the game as a dumpster fire for shit that can be disproven by actually playing it is astoundingly stupid. It's gotten to the point where Video Game Donkey, the villain of this channel, is agreeing with me on this one, giving the game a 4 out of 5, which is an above average score for him. And in all honesty, I agree with it. For what the game puts on the table, updated combat, amazingly beautiful visuals, a story that twists and turns that can make you feel utterly hopeless on one moment and then happy in the other, The Last of Us 2 is definitely a Kino game. Join my Discord. I wanna